For 30 years, people told her she was wrong, that memory twists, that photos lie, that grief creates ghosts. But one image, creased, faded, still sharp in the corner, held a truth no one wanted to see. And once she saw it, nothing in her world stayed the same. The last morning felt ordinary in the way a small border town morning often did. Sprinklers ticked. A dog barked 2 houses down. 3 identical boys in matching shirts chased the same red rubber ball across the patchy grass, laughing like the air itself belonged to them. Eve wiped her hands on a towel in the kitchen and called through the screen, 5 minutes, then breakfast. She stepped back to the laundry room, counted out a stack of folded shirts, and set them on the table. 10 steps there, 10 steps back. When she reached the porch again, the swing moved once and went still, and the patch of yard where her boy should have been looked wrong, like a frame with the picture missing. She searched the porch first, then the side yard, then the sidewalk to the corner where chalk hopscotch squares still showed through last night's dust. Neighbors came without being asked. Doors opened. Names carried on warm air. They looked under porches and behind trash cans and inside the shed that always smelled like oil. Someone said maybe the boys had followed the ice cream truck. Someone said maybe they were hiding. A minute stretched, then another, and the sound of the street changed from casual Saturday to something tight and thin that made people lower their voices. Time didn't behave after that. It split. In one part, life went on with school bells and casseroles and Christmas lights that blinked on at dusk. In the other, a mother stood in a yard that hummed like any other yard and called 3 names into air that would not answer back. Years piled up. People learned not to say the boys' names because kindness sometimes looks like silence. Eve learned to sleep in careful pieces, to do the dishes before dusk, to keep the porch light on longer than necessary. She kept a showbox on the top shelf of her closet. Inside lived 2 ticket stubs from the county fair, a paper crown with 3 points, a broken blue crayon, and a Polaroid with frosting on 3 noses. Beneath those, wrapped in a thin tea towel like something sacred, lay a leather-bound album the color of warm honey. Some nights she would sit on the edge of her bed and hold each item as if the past were a language you could relearn by touch. Hope didn't leave. It only learned to be quiet. People told her she remembered it wrong. Dates get tangled, they said. The mind tries to fix what it can't hold, they said. She let them talk. She stacked the years. She learned how to carry doubt without letting it touch the floor. Still, the picture waited, the one she had taken herself on the last ordinary morning. She took the photo that would prove everyone wrong. On a Saturday many years later, an envelope arrived from 3 doors down. The card inside was cheerful, rimmed in balloon confetti. Backyard birthday. Come by afternoon. Casual. Bring yourself. She turned it over once, twice, as if another message might be hiding under the ink. Walter suggested they take a plate of cookies and stay an hour. It would be good, he said, to stand under a tree and listen to ordinary laughter. She said yes, because yes was easier than explaining the shape of her no. She set the card by the phone and smoothed the edge with her thumb. She did not know that a yard filled with paper plates and bright balloons could open a door she had pressed her hands against for 30 years. She did not know that a small detail, the kind that hides in plain sight, was waiting at that party to step out of the past and into her open palm. The backyard was already alive when they arrived. Balloons bumped and tangled on their strings, paper plates sagged under the weight of cupcakes, and the hiss of a grill carried over the chatter of neighbors. Saturday laughter drifted through the air, the kind that rises easily when nothing heavier waits at the edges. Eve stood near the folding table, her hands resting on the rim of a lemonade pitcher slick with condensation, listening but not truly hearing. A child in a red shirt tried to catch the spray of the sprinkler and squealed when it hit him square in the chest. She smiled politely, the way one does when invited into other people's joy. The new neighbor came late, walking in with an apologetic smile and a casserole dish covered in foil. In his other hand was the small hand of his son, a boy no older than 8. The child wriggled free, half hop, half spin, and darted toward the games near the patio. Eve's eyes caught the flash of fabric before her mind even had the words for it. Green checkered overalls, brass buttons winking in the sun, yellow stitching that curved like a memory. A long-sleeved shirt rolled just above the wrists. The same pattern, the same color, the same echo of a morning she had tried for decades not to replay. Her breath caught, her body moved before sense could stop it. She stepped forward, hand rising as if pulled by a string. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice thin and shaking. "Where did you?" The boy flinched, wide-eyed, and bolted back to his father. "Dad." "She grabbed me," he cried, clinging tight. Eve's hand hung useless in the air, never touching him, trembling in the space between. The father's face shifted to protectiveness, then confusion when he saw her pale and shaking. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" His tone was careful, not unkind, but wary now. Eve's lips parted. No words came, only the bright brass buttons burning in her vision. "The overalls," she managed finally. "Where did you get them?" He frowned, steadying his son with a hand on the shoulder. "A store months ago. I can't even remember which one. Is there a problem?" His boy buried his face against his side, breathing fast. The yard's laughter quieted, conversations faltered. Walter appeared, steady as always, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he told the man gently, though his fingers pressed harder than usual. "We lost our sons a long time ago. They wore outfits just like that. Seeing your boy," it hit hard. His words smoothed the air, gave the father something to understand. The man's stance softened, his voice easing. "I'm sorry. We just moved here. I didn't know." He crouched slightly, murmuring comfort to his son. Abby swallowed, shame rising hot, but her eyes refused to leave the fabric. "Could I see the tag?" she asked, softer now, almost pleading. The father shook his head gently. "Not now. He's scared enough." He pulled the boy closer, shielding him with a protective arm. A neighbor pressed a slice of watermelon into Eve's hand, her voice too bright. "Why don't you sit, dear?" The birthday song began in the background, thin and off-key, but Eve heard none of it. She stared at the green pattern that wasn't quite right. Newer cut, brighter shade, different stitching. Not the same garment. Not the same day. But her chest tightened all the same. Why did it feel like a sign? They left the party early, smiles polite, excuses thin. At home, Walter moved down the hallway without a word and pulled the attic string. The ladder side open, dust drifting in the beam of the ceiling light. A moment later, he came back down, arms wrapped around a cardboard carton softened at the corners by years of being carried and put back, carried and put back. They set it on the coffee table. The flaps opened with the quiet rip of old tape giving way. Inside were the relics of a life that had once filled every corner of their house. 2 identical stuffed bears, ribbons frayed at the neck, the third missing. A handful of toy cars, paint chipped at the edges from small thumbs, pushing them hard along wooden floors. Worksheets with backward letters and bright gold stars. A paper crown with 3 points still bent from a birthday game. Eve touched each piece lightly, as though the past might crumble if pressed too hard. At the very bottom, wrapped in a thin tea towel, lay the leather album. She placed it on her lap. The cover had turned from deep brown to warm honey, softened by time. When she lifted the first page, the room seemed to exhale. 3 newborns swaddled side by side, toddlers with frosting on their cheeks. Small boys chasing bubbles in the yard. Each photo a breath held too long. They turned slowly, one page after another, until the picture they had both avoided appeared. Three boys stood shoulder to shoulder in matching green checkered overalls, brass buttons gleaming, long sleeves peeking from underneath. Arms linked, their smiles unbreakable, sunlight making halos on their curls. It was the last photo before the silence. But it wasn't the boys that made Eve's breath catch. It was what lingered at the far edge of the frame, half hidden, blurred by distance. The curve of a deep burgundy coupe, chrome grille flashing in the morning light. The old Cadillac, beloved in town, unmistakable. She whispered the name of its owner, her voice trembling. A teacher. Gentle, patient, loved by children and parents alike. A man who had left a week before the boys vanished. Everyone remembered the farewell party, the banner, the lemonade. Yet here was his car, parked across from their house, the very morning her sons disappeared. Maybe the date's wrong, Walter said, voice low, searching for a softer answer. Maybe this roll got mixed. He didn't believe it. Neither did she. Eve reached back into the carton and pulled out a thin yellow Kodak envelope. Its edges were soft, but the stamp was clear. June 14, 1981. Developed 2 days after the boys went missing. The prints inside matched the album exactly: porch, breakfast table, the last smiles, the car. The timeline held steady. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. The photograph had not lied. The car was there. The teacher had not moved away, or he had come back. Walter sat close enough to feel her shaking. Neither spoke. The evidence was small, only a corner of chrome and color. But it was enough to bend 30 years of memory into a new shape. Enough to reopen a door she had never stopped knocking on. Eve sat at the kitchen table with the photo album still open, her hand resting on the image of 3 small boys in green overalls. The corner of the page showed that deep burgundy car, and the weight of it pressed on her chest. She picked up the phone and scrolled her contacts until she found Louise Hayes, a school board member who had served for decades. Louise had been there for every hiring, every farewell, every paper signed. If anyone would know the truth, it was her. The call connected on the second ring. Louise's voice came warm, full of cheer. Eve. What a surprise. It's been too long. Eve tried to return the tone, but her words were tight. Louise, I need to ask you something. About. About Mr. Fielding. Do you remember when he left Oak Ridge Elementary? Of course, Louise said quickly. Everyone remembers. He said he was transferring. We even threw him a goodbye party. She chuckled faintly, but it trailed off when she heard no answer on the other end. Eve forced the question out. Did he ever file the paperwork? Transfer papers? Anything official? There was a pause. Louise sighed. No, not with our district, and not with any nearby. I checked more than once years later. He never filed. He just left. Eve's hand tightened around the phone. So he didn't move to another school? No, Louise said gently. What I heard later is that he started something different. A kind of foundation, out in the rural belt. A ranch for boys who needed help. Farming, chores, structure. He built it from the ground up. His name was on the flyers we used to see when people donated boots or notebooks. Eve opened her laptop and typed with unsteady fingers. The page loaded slowly, as if it knew the gravity of its arrival. A plain banner stretched across the top. Smiling boys pushing a wheelbarrow, rows of green crops behind them. Another picture showed a classroom with paper stars dangling from strings. The words underneath sounded careful, polished: safety, growth, dignity, stability. On the About page, there was a photo of him. Older now, hair grayer, but the same eyes. The biography was short. Former elementary teacher, lifelong passion for helping children, founder of Howard's Haven for Hope. She scrolled to the bottom, looking for a phone number. There wasn't one. Just a mailing address on a county road she didn't recognize and a generic email link. No direct line. No way to call. For a moment she stared at the screen, the cursor blinking in silence, her own reflection staring back. Walter came in with 2 mugs of tea. He saw the website and stopped, his hand tightening on the handle. Is that? Yes, Eve whispered. He never transferred. He never left. He built this. Her finger hovered above the contact email, but didn't click. I need to see it with my own eyes. Walter studied her face. He saw the tremor in her lip, the way she braced herself. He set the mugs down and reached for the keys hanging by the door. Then we'll go, he said simply. Today. You're not carrying this alone anymore. She closed the laptop, pressed the photo envelope to her chest, and followed him out into the sunlight. The road to the ranch narrowed to gravel, dust rising in slow curtains behind the car. A hand-painted sign leaned slightly in the wind, letters carved deep into wood. Howard's Haven for Hope. Past it, the land opened to a neat cluster of buildings, a white farmhouse with a broad porch, 2 barns kept in careful repair, and a line of cabins tucked beneath cottonwoods. The place looked ordinary, almost wholesome, as if the soil itself had been taught to behave. A young man in a gray t-shirt stepped out of a barn, wiping his palms on a rag. He had the steady smile of someone who had greeted strangers before. Most of the staff and kids are off at the county fair, he explained, running a booth, showing animals. But if you want a quick look, I can show you around. Walter nodded, and the young man gestured for them to follow. They walked the grounds in silence broken only by his easy commentary. The cabins were small but orderly, 2 chairs on each porch, towels pinned neatly on railings, boots set in straight rows beneath the steps. Gardens stretched in tidy lines, tomato vines held upright with string, herbs marked with painted stakes. The barns smelled of hay and clean wood, with tools hung in measured order and floors swept clear. Nothing here spoke of neglect. Everything spoke of care. Finally, the guide pushed open a door painted coral, and a new smell hit: glue, beans, poster paint. The kids' craft room, he said. Inside, long tables held tubs of supplies, buttons, fabric scraps, pasta shapes, jars of rice and dried beans. The walls were crowded with color, finger paint rainbows, paper suns with uneven rays, animals made of cut-out triangles. It was loud with creativity, even in the children's absence. At the far table, a man stood arranging materials. He turned when they entered. His smile was bright, almost too quick, lighting his whole face. Black curls framed his forehead, and he moved with practiced ease, towel still in his hand. I'm the activities coordinator, he said, offering his hand warmly. Been here a long time. Since I was 6, actually. Mr. Fielding took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Eve's heart thumped, though she returned the handshake. His voice carried enthusiasm as he showed them the wall of artwork. We do texture projects, he explained, pointing to a piece at the center. On heavy cardstock, someone had pressed grains of rice and beans into the shape of a car. Not just any car. A long, elegant coupe shaded in red, the hood and grille drawn with patient detail. Chrome suggested in pencil, windows shaded in delicate strokes. A classic, captured with care. I made that one, the coordinator admitted with a chuckle. Had to give them an example. They'll try with bottle caps next week. Kids love the noise when it all falls. He spoke lightly, but Eve's focus narrowed on the car's curve. The long hood, the way the wheel turned slightly outward, the deep red suggested even through bits of rice. It felt like recognition, as sharp as the day she had spotted it in the old photograph. Her hand drifted toward the page before she pulled it back. She forced a smile, nodded at the cheerful chaos pinned across the rest of the wall. But the image stayed with her, pressing at her ribs like a truth not ready to speak its name. Outside, the wind rattled the windows gently, as if reminding her she was still standing in the present. Still, she could feel the past stirring in her chest. Walter thanked the coordinator. Eve murmured something polite, but her eyes lingered on that red car until the door closed behind them. The county fair was already spilling over the fields by the time they arrived. Ribbons and bright colors fluttered from poles, and the air smelled like grilled corn, fried dough, and wood smoke drifting from the barbecue pits. Children darted between stalls with sticky fingers, faces painted with stars and butterflies. A folk band tuned up near the main stage, fiddle and guitar weaving a tune that mixed with the squeals of livestock penned nearby. It was noisy, warm, alive, too much life to fit into one place. They found the ranch's booth tucked along the vendor row. Unlike the others, it was neat and deliberate. A canvas banner stretched tight, handouts stacked square, a tablecloth ironed smooth. The photographs on display were wholesome, a boy leading a calf with a rope, a group planting seedlings in straight rows, children holding books in a sunlit classroom. Words printed across the flyers promised safety, stability, dignity. It looked exactly the way a donor would want it to look. And then he appeared, older now, but still with that same careful poise. His hair had gone silver, but his voice when he greeted them carried the same smooth warmth that had once made parents trust him with their children. "Welcome," he said with practiced ease. "We're proud of what we've built here." His smile never faltered, polite and steady. Walter spoke first, steadying the air. "We used to know you. Oak Ridge Elementary. Our sons," he paused, glanced at Eve. "They were in your class." Recognition flickered and then smoothed away. "I remember many children," he said, nodding slowly. "Those were good years." His tone was even, generous, but distant, as if memory had edges he did not want to touch. Eve reached into her bag and slid the photograph onto the table. "This was taken the morning my boys disappeared," she said quietly. "Is that your car, parked across our street?" For a breath, he stilled. His eyes dropped to the corner of the image, the glint of chrome, the burgundy hood. Then he straightened, his smile held in place. "I can't say," he replied. "Many cars looked alike then. I wasn't in your neighborhood that day. I'm sorry for your loss. Truly." She felt the lie coil in her chest like smoke. Her hand pressed the photograph flat on the table, but Walter touched her arm, urging calm. Around them, the fair carried on, laughter, music, the smell of sugar in the air. To anyone passing by, the exchange looked like neighborly talk. The teacher excused himself for a moment, stepping just outside the booth with his phone. He angled his body away, but the breeze carried his words back to her. Low, clipped, urgent. "Leave right after the performance. Get him here now." Eve froze. The music seemed to dim, the clatter of the crowd falling away beneath that single line. Walter's eyes met hers, wide and sharp. He had heard it too. They both turned back toward the booth as he slipped his phone into his pocket and returned with the same composed smile. "The children are performing soon," he said warmly. "It's quite sweet. You'll enjoy it." Eve slid the photo back into her bag. Her pulse thudded in her ears. They moved toward the edge of the crowd where the stage, the booth, and the path to the parking lot were all in sight. On stage, children lined up in neat rows, their shirts tucked in, their shoes polished. The band began to play, cheerful and bright. But Eve barely heard it. She was watching the booth, watching the teacher, watching the exit. Every detail now felt like the tightening of a wire just before it snaps. The music from the stage swelled, children's voices carrying on the breeze. Eve tried to focus on them, but her eyes kept darting across the vendor aisle. That was when she saw him, a man moving quickly, cutting through the crowd with purpose. He carried a small box against his chest, his head tilted slightly forward, as if to make himself smaller in the flow of people. The sun caught his curls and turned them to dark copper. His smile flashed once when he recognized the booth ahead, bright and immediate, too familiar. Her heart jolted. The same hair, the same grin that had greeted her in the ranch craft room only hours before. The man set the box down at the booth, and the teacher stepped forward. Their conversation was tight, urgent, low, but gestures told the story words couldn't. The younger man pointed toward the stage where the children sang. The teacher lifted a palm, pressing the air down as if to calm him. Then the man jabbed a thumb toward the parking lot, his shoulders tense. The teacher's response was smaller, but final. A point, a shake of the head, a nod to wait. Walter shifted closer, his body angling to shield her. "It's him," Eve whispered, though her throat felt raw. Walter didn't answer, only tightened his hand on hers, steady but hard. They both watched the men, mirror and reflection, as if the coordinator had stepped into daylight wearing new clothes. A staffer in a yellow vest paused nearby, adjusting a crooked sign taped to a post. Eve touched his sleeve lightly. "The young man at that booth, who is he?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. The volunteer followed her gaze, then smiled, casual as though sharing a fun fact. "One of the twins," he said. "Good workers, both of them." "Twins," she repeated softly. The man chuckled. "Triplets, actually. The third one doesn't come out much, works off-site at a private property." He shrugged and went back to his clipboard, leaving his words behind like dropped stones. "Triplets!" The fair noise blurred into a low hum. Eva's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat echoing that word. Triplets. The same age her boys would be now. The same features, the hair, the smiles, the tilt of their faces when they listened. For a moment she couldn't breathe, caught between the memory of three small children standing in sunlight and the sight of two grown men standing by a booth at a county fair. Walter's hand squeezed hers, firm, steady. His voice was a whisper meant only for her. "It's time." She nodded, unable to look away. The teacher's eyes flicked over the crowd again, too often, too sharply. The younger man shifted on his feet, restless, like someone waiting for a signal. Children's voices lifted on stage, bright and sweet, but beneath the song tension thrummed like a wire stretched to breaking. Triplets, the right age. Eve held Walter's gaze for a long moment, then whispered the words neither of them had ever expected to say out loud. "We call." They didn't run. They didn't shout. Walter guided her toward the parking lot, as though they were simply leaving for an early supper, but once they reached the car his hands trembled against the steering wheel. He pulled out his phone and dialed, his voice steady only because it had to be. "Missing persons, please. This is about a cold case, 3 boys taken in 1981. The call transferred, and a calm voice came through the speaker. "Detective Martinez. Tell me what you're seeing." Walter gave him the facts, photograph, the car, the teacher, the 2 men who looked like reflections, the staffer's casual mention of triplets. There was no laughter on the other end, no dismissal. Only firm instruction: maintain distance. Do not engage. Units are en route. They drove back toward the ranch, pulling off just before the entrance and tucking the sedan behind a line of mesquite. From there, they had a clear view of the long gravel drive leading to the farmhouse. The sun was sinking, painting everything in a soft gold that made the buildings look almost gentle. Eve clutched the photo in her lap, the creased corner digging into her palm. Walter kept the phone on speaker, Martinez's calm voice filling the space. Sheriff's deputies are 3 minutes out. Stay put. A low hum rose in the distance. Then two cruisers eased onto the gravel, lights pulsing low, sirens off. They rolled to a stop just inside the drive, angled slightly to slow any exit without making it look like a blockade. Doors opened, and the deputies stepped out, hands near their belts, but faces calm, almost courteous. From the porch, three figures appeared. The teacher in front, the two young men behind him with duffel bags slung over their shoulders. They walked with practiced ease, as though leaving for a trip. The teacher lifted a hand in a neighborly wave, his expression calm, even faintly amused. The deputies greeted him politely, voices low, respectful. They knew him. Everyone in the county did. He had been a teacher, a mentor, the founder of a charity. Small towns carry long memories, and the weight of that respect tilted the moment. The deputies asked questions that sounded more like favors. Sir, mind if we clear a few things up? Just routine. The teacher gestured easily, pointing toward the barns, the office, the fields, his tone smooth as honey poured. Eve gripped Walter's arm. They're softening, she whispered. He nodded, jaw tight. She could see it, the deputies wanting to believe the man in front of them, wanting to protect the image they had of him. Courtesy was winning over suspicion. The photograph in her hand burned. She thought of 30 years of silence, 30 years of doubt folded into closets and boxes. Her feet moved before fear could stop them. She opened the car door, stepped into the light, and walked forward, dust lifting with each step. Walter called her name once, but she didn't stop. The deputies turned as she emerged from the shade. She lifted the photograph high so the sun caught it, voice breaking but steady enough to carry. Mr. Fielding, she called, her words sharp as glass in the quiet. All heads turned. The teacher's smile faltered. The deputies paused, the balance of the moment shifting. Eve's hand shook as she held the photo higher. For the first time in decades, she was no longer silent. She was calling him by name. The photograph shook in her hand, but her voice held. This was taken the morning my boys disappeared, Eve said, each word scraping the air. Look at the corner. That car, yours. You were there. The teacher's eyes flicked to the photo, just long enough for the tremor to register. He recovered quickly, smile stretching back across his face. Ma'am, I understand your grief, he said smoothly. But you're mistaken. I never drove through your street that day. I was already gone. I've spent 30 years helping children others abandoned. I rescued them. The words dropped like stones, but Eve didn't waver. Rescued? Her voice cracked, then steadied with heat. They weren't abandoned. They were taken. From our yard. While I was making breakfast. Her chest rose and fell fast. Her eyes locked on his. The two young men behind him shifted uneasily. One leaned forward a step, his gaze fixed on the photograph, his lips parting as if to speak. The other's brow furrowed, eyes darting between the picture and Eve's face. Recognition is quiet at first, a flicker, then a flood. Something had broken loose in their expression, something that no careful lie could hold down forever. The deputies exchanged a glance. The older one cleared his throat. Sir, let's step aside. Ma'am, we need you over here. They moved to separate the groups, guiding Walter gently toward Eve, motioning the young men toward the porch steps. The teacher lifted his hands, palms open, playing the part of a man caught in someone else's storm. I have nothing to hide, he said, though his jaw tightened as the words left him. I've built a life of service. Detective Martinez strode up then, his badge catching the sun. He didn't waste time. He gestured to a deputy. Check the garage." The man jogged off, the rumble of the door groaning open seconds later. Dust rolled into the air, and then silence. A whistle broke it, low, astonished. "Detective, you need to see this." Everyone turned. Inside the shadowed bay sat a deep burgundy coupe, its chrome grille dull with age, but still unmistakable. The same car frozen in Eve's photograph. The air seemed to stop. The two young men stared at it, as if seeing a ghost made of steel and paint. One took another hesitant step forward, his mouth opening in disbelief. Martinez didn't blink. He spoke into his radio, voice firm. "Confirm visual on suspect vehicle tied to missing persons case. Secure immediately." He looked back at the teacher, his tone harder now. "Mr. Fielding, you'll need to come with us." The teacher's charm cracked, his smile dropping as if it had never been real. "You don't understand," he snapped, anger flashing sharp. "I gave them a life. Their parents couldn't. I saved them from misery." "No," Abby said, voice cutting through him. "You stole them. And you stole 30 years from us." The younger deputy stepped in behind him, hand firm on his shoulder. "Turn around, sir." Metal cuffs clicked closed, small and final. Martinez raised a hand, signaling his team. "Execute the warrants," he ordered. Papers rustled, radios flared alive. Deputies moved toward the house with purpose. In the sunlight, the photograph drooped in Eve's hand, its edges trembling. But for the first time in decades, she felt the weight shift, not gone, not healed, but finally moving toward truth. The farmhouse filled with the shuffle of boots and the hum of radios. Deputies moved through rooms with cameras and evidence bags, cataloging piece by piece the world the teacher had built. In the office, a locked drawer resisted, then gave way. Inside lay 2 license plates wrapped in cloth, screws neatly bundled in a matchbox. Beneath them sat a stack of envelopes. Walter leaned forward, but stopped himself short as Martinez lifted them with gloved hands. Passports, birth certificates, driver's licenses. The faces were the same, but the names shifted like masks. On the desk lay binders labeled with careful handwriting: intake, school, medical. Inside, each boy had a history written in neat teacher cursive. Dates and places, warm descriptions, even staged photos taped to the corners. Whole lives invented, bound like textbooks. Eve stared at the loops of ink, the tidy paragraphs, and felt her stomach twist. They weren't just lies. They were replacements, built page by page until truth had no room left to breathe. In the garage, another deputy called for the detective. Beneath a tarp lay a shallow bin, a small ledger, brittle at the edges. Martinez opened it carefully, scanning rows of gas receipts from that summer. Each one marked with handwritten notes, mile counts, turns, times. A route carved across weeks, each stop folded into secrecy. "He planned this," Martinez murmured. "Every step." The pages slid into an evidence bag with a quiet snap. Outside, the 2 young men sat on the porch steps, separated by deputies, but close enough to keep stealing glances at one another. Martinez crouched nearby, voice even. He didn't press for details, only offered questions simple enough to answer. Slowly, the truth slipped out, not loud, not graphic, but steady. Childhood was strict, obedience demanded, questions were punished. Praise meant staying silent, moving exactly as told. He said rules were love. One of them whispered that safety meant never asking why. The other nodded, his hands knotted in his lap. We thought it was normal. We thought it was what made us good. Their eyes were wet, but no tears fell. A radio crackled. A deputy hurried over, voice low but clear. "Dispatch from the private estate. Contact made. Third adult male located on site with younger children." Situation calm. All secure. Eve felt her chest tighten, then loosen in one long, shaky breath. The missing third. Alive. The message continued. Advocates requested for transport. EMS en route. Children between 4 and 10 all safe for now. Moving them out. Relief rippled across the group like a soft tide. Walter closed his eyes and let his head rest in his hands for a moment. Eve gripped the photo tighter, as though the edges might cut her palms, grounding her in this moment that was finally tilting toward hope. Vans pulled into the drive, their doors marked with the county seal. Men and women in plain shirts stepped out carrying clipboards, soft-voiced and steady. They weren't deputies. They were the kind of people who knew how to sit on the floor with a child and make the world less frightening. They walked past the porch, offering gentle nods, and disappeared inside. The farmhouse, once a place that pretended to be safe, was turning into evidence. Every drawer, every shelf, every false name sealed in plastic. The air smelled of dust and hay, and the sharp ink of forms being filled. The net had closed, not with shouting or violence, but with the quiet, firm work of truth being written down properly at last. The interview room at the station was small, painted the same pale color as countless others. A buzzing light above hummed like a second heartbeat. Eve sat stiff in her chair, fingers laced tightly together, the photograph resting between her palms. Walter sat beside her, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the table. Across from them, Detective Martinez laid a folder flat, his voice steady but not unkind. "He's been talking," Martinez began. "Not fighting the paperwork. Not yet. What we know so far is this: 30 years ago, he lost his wife and 2 sons in a house fire. That grief never healed. He never got treatment, never let himself accept it. Instead, it hardened. In his mind, children like yours became a second chance. He told himself he could rescue them, shape them, build a world that couldn't be taken from him." Eve pressed the photo closer to her chest, but said nothing. Martinez continued, flipping through his notes. He lured them the way trusted adults can. The car, your oldest was fascinated by it. He promised a ride, maybe ice cream after. He already had bags packed, plates removed, documents forged. He was prepared. Once he had them, he rewrote their lives. New names, new birthdays. Carefully staged photo albums, captions in his own handwriting. He layered the lies until the truth was buried. Walter's voice came rough. "And we let them out to play. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes in the yard." Martinez leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Listen to me. The failure wasn't yours. He was trusted. He was respected. Parents let him drive children home all the time. You were ordinary parents in an ordinary moment. The failure was his alone." Across the hall, a muffled sound carried, a chair scraping, voices low. The detective lowered his voice. "We showed the evidence to the 2 young men. The photo, the albums, the real birth records. At first, it was like the ground dropped out from under them. They believed his story for decades, that their parents were gone, that they were unwanted. Shock is normal. It feels like water underfoot. But clarity is starting to break through." Abby swallowed hard, a tear slipping free. "Do they hate us?" she whispered. Martinez shook his head. "No, they don't know what to do with it yet. But hate isn't there. Confusion, grief, disbelief. That's what I see. Time and steadiness will matter now. You've waited 3 decades. Give them the pace they need." Walter reached for her hand under the table, pressed his thumb gently into the soft space between her knuckles. She clung to it, grounding herself against the weight of everything that had just been spoken. The hallway grew louder now, footsteps moving closer. The hum of voices, the shuffle of more than one pair of shoes. Eve's pulse quickened, her breath shallow. Martinez closed the folder, slid it aside, and nodded toward the door. The handle turned. The door opened, and three men stood there. For a moment, no one moved. The light from the hallway framed them, shoulders squared, faces older than she had imagined, yet familiar in ways her heart knew before her eyes could catch up. Eve rose slowly. Then, all at once, a sob breaking loose from somewhere she had kept locked for 30 years. The first stepped forward, broad-shouldered, his smile breaking even as tears swelled. He crossed the room in 3 strides and folded her into his arms. The second followed, his hand landing gently on Walter's shoulder before pulling both of them close. The third lingered a beat longer, smaller frame, eyes searching hers. When she whispered his name, he came to, closing the circle. They clung together, not speaking at first. Breath and weeping filled the silence, time collapsing in the space of an embrace. She touched their faces one by one, tracing lines that had not been there when they were boys. Cheekbones sharper, brows furrowed deeper, but beneath it all, their eyes, their warmth, their belonging. Walter's shoulders shook as he pulled them in tighter, his quiet sobs unashamed. Chairs scraped back, tissue boxes slid forward, but the room held still around them. Words trickled in, hesitant at first. They spoke of routines, of chores, of a childhood measured by rules instead of laughter. Eve and Walter shared pieces of birthdays missed, of candles blown out in silence, of porch lights left burning into the night. Their stories met in the middle, fragile but real, each side building a bridge toward the other. Eve looked down at the photograph she had carried for so long, its edges creased from decades of handling. She thought of how people had told her memory lies, how they had insisted she must be wrong. But the picture had never lied. That corner of chrome, that car, that morning, it had held the truth. And in the end, it proved everyone wrong, even her own doubt. She kissed each of her sons on the cheek, as if to reclaim lost years. Not healed, not yet, but together. That was enough for now. The rest would take mornings, afternoons, long talks, and patience. Bridges are not built in a single day, but one plank at a time. Her voice caught as she lifted her eyes to the camera that had been left recording in the corner. "Tell us where you're watching from," she said softly. "And if careful, calm storytelling matters to you, subscribe." The words weren't a pitch. They were a hand held out, steady and true. Outside, the night was beginning to settle, stars pricking the sky one by one. Inside, the room hummed with the sound of new beginnings. Walter held her hand, their sons within reach. After 3 decades of silence, they were no longer a broken family. They were simply a family, ready to begin again. One morning at a time,